Just finished reading part 940 of the Reese Chronological Bible that continued on with Matthew chapter 21. And it speaks about the keeper or the husbandman of a vineyard that had folks who were taking care of his vineyard, and how the folks who were taking care of it were beaten and sent away bruised and killed and stoned. And this is speaking of the prophets. The vineyard isn't like the house of Israel. It's God's kingdom. The Jewish nation is in charge of that, preparing for the Christ. But they shamefully entreated the prophets, beat them, stoned them, killed them. So then it mentions here that about the son, the heir. They will reverence my son. But the husbandmen saw the son, and they said among themselves, this is the heir. We've been reading that throughout, how these Pharisees reasoned among themselves. And of course we know that this is what happens to Jesus. He gets cast out of the vineyards. He was smitten without the gate, which is where the sin offering was to be taken, outside the camp, even from the Old Testament. And Jesus was the sin offering. Same thing in Mark 12. Talked about the prophets mentioned as the servants of the husbandman, God being the husbandman. The servants, the prophets, who were shamefully entreated, shamefully handled. And then he had one son. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, his well-beloved. He sent him last unto them to the house of Israel. They will reverence my son. But those husbandmen said among themselves, this is the heir, come, let us kill him. The chief priests, the prophets, the scribes, or not the prophets, the Pharisees, they took him and killed him and cast him out of the vineyard, suffering without the gate. And then again in Luke 20. It's all read. But something I wanted to mention. See, it mentions the chief cornerstone. The Lord, in one of the recent Thoughts videos, or after one of the readings, had me to speak that notion of the chief cornerstone. But what I was going to say is you have to go back, if you want to capture even just the one chapter of Matthew 21, you have to go back to 935 of the Reese Chronological Bible and listen to all these readings from 935 up until 940, just to capture the one chapter, and then these little segments. And you have to recognize how, right from the start, the Pharisees were watching him, and how they would have taken him in the temple, as he mentions that in Matthew 21, and in the part 936, the next reading, it talks about the cleansing of the temple, and how that they did not take him for fear of the Jews. It was also in Matthew 21, in part 937, I believe. No, I'm sorry, it's 938. They reasoned among themselves. Reasoned with themselves. And that's what he's talking about. He said and later in the chapter here, they reasoned among themselves. Oops, I'm not in the right spot here. They said among themselves. Just as earlier I showed you that they reasoned among themselves with what Jesus said to them. Reasoned with themselves. So please, if you would, and if you haven't, listen to part 935 up until 940 to capture the entire chapter of Matthew 21, and then of course the other chapters that were also read during this period of reading from the Chronological Bible.